All right. So for starters, just go ahead and give us your first, last name, and your title that you want to be referenced as.
Gill Alexander, host of a numbers game on VSiN, Monday through Friday, and the Beating the Book podcast.
All right. So we're talking about the college basketball FBI investigation. Um, just kind of give me your overall thoughts and just kind of your reaction to seeing it.
Well, my first reaction, to be honest with you, is not one I'm proud of, which is that we have become so numb to this at this point um, that it barely even moved me. The story broke when I was doing the radio show this morning, and we touched on it. But, if this were 7 years ago when PASPA was first ruled unconstitutional, we'd be just up in arms about this, like, oh my God, this is the biggest scandal in the world. If this were, 4 months ago, before we heard about the Terry Rozier scandal and the Chauncey Billups scandal in the NBA in terms of gambling, and then the poker scandal with Billups, we'd probably have our antennas raised much more than we do. At this point, it's it has sadly become unsurprising, and I hate to say it, but I think that it's only my opinion is that it's only a fair assumption that based on what I read, that there's probably more to come, was sort of my interpretation of it.
Do you find that, I hate to say this also, but do you find this that's going to become a norm now that there's just going to be coming more reports of, you know, gamblers and, just trying to look for any way to cash in?
Yeah, I do. Listen, my whole life is doing betting content. I do 15 hours of radio a week. I do 2 hours of podcasts about sports betting. It's the love of my life. I try to do it from a cerebral perspective. And I was among these guys who would always push against that crowd, that inevitable crowd on Twitter, the sort of low hanging fruit of, oh, everything's fixed, everything's rigged. And now I have to admit that, you know what? Sometimes they're not wrong. And to answer your question, yeah, I think that there is going to be more of this only because, and I think it's just a very safe answer, because this isn't back in the day where betting was done offshore or at the local corner. It's now accessible to everyone through their phones. And I think with that comes more and more, the accessibility alone is just going to produce more and more people who scheme to have games fixed, um, and will prey on some folks to make it happen for them. And so, yeah, I think it's a long way of saying, yeah, I hate to say it, but I believe it's inevitable that this will continue to happen. It'll be a game of whack-a-mole, really, right? One flare up here, one flare up there, and I don't think it'll ever be shut down entirely.
Um, there's always that big debate, with sports coming here to Vegas. Well, they have gambling, and so what does something like this do for that discussion as we try to, we have the A's coming and we are trying to get an NBA team.
Well, so that's the thing, right? It's there's never an easy answer to this. What's going on these days is that legalized sports books and those that have been here the longest in Las Vegas, in the state of Nevada, are sort of up in arms about prediction markets now. Prediction markets sort of doing an end around on what used to be the hoops that books had to jump through to get licensed in the first place. So there's that swirling around. That's one thing. And books may take the position like, oh, look, the problem is that you have all these things that are unregulated that have these available. But the truth is that these things that are available at the books themselves, legalized sports books, whether it's in Nevada or beyond, and leagues are in bed with these books through advertising or what have you. And so the only thing that can be done is some sort of cooperation. Let's take the Emmanuel Clase, Luis Ortiz situation with the Cleveland Guardians. You can get leagues and books who are in business together. have business relationships together. When you say you're in business together, it makes it sound more nefarious than it really is, but who have business relationships with each other, you can get the leagues to say, or in this case, Rob Manfred and Major League Baseball to say, hey, can you at least remove these props for the first pitch in an inning, right? Like we don't need to have that. And books will probably look at what their handle is, right? Nevada or otherwise, and say, yeah, we can get rid of those. But the fact is, can they do anything really about player props in general when the handle that they get on these player props grows and grows and grows? The DraftKings and FanDuels of the world make absolutely so much money on that stuff. Part of the same game parlays, which they so aggressively promote, a lot of those have to do with props, right? You can't do a same game parlay the way they have them structured without including player props. So there is some amount of things they can do, um, but there is a limit to what they can do because otherwise, then you can't take away everything because then it affects the betting experience. So I just think you're never going to get consensus agreement um, on everything. It's just a problem for which there isn't much of a full solution. They can incrementally around the margins help, but I just feel like this is something that, when PASPA was ruled unconstitutional, that maybe they foresaw, maybe they gave lip service to foreseeing it, but I don't know that they could have anticipated this.
Um, with college athletics now, with NIL deals and everything like that, the money just swirling around collegiate athletics, and then you throw in the gambling aspect of things. Do you think it's more enticing to players, to officials, and whatever, in terms of missing a free throw on purpose or whatnot, because of that money aspect now?
Well, I mean, the problem is for every player who makes several million dollars in an NIL deal, there's going to be exponentially more players who don't make that kind of money and who might, to your point, look across the court or the field and say, man, I'm not happy that those guys are making money. I want some for myself. And that might be their way to do it. So yeah, I mean, that's the other thing about this. These are humans that are all involved, right? Humans are flawed. We all are. And so temptation exists. And so, yeah, I think with more money swirling around, to use your phrase, it's just another little point of how folks are going to see that kind of money and figure out how they can be a part of it if they're not doing it the more conventional way that the better players are doing it. We saw that in the NBA, by the way, with Jonte Porter. I just mentioned earlier Terry Rozier and Chauncey Billups. Well, those are great NBA players or former great NBA player in Billups and a current NBA coach. Well, you can question why someone like that would get involved in what they got involved in allegedly. But Jonte Porter, you kind of get a guy who's making $400,000 a year, which might be a lot to a mere mortal, but to an NBA player must seem like he's a pauper. I can see how someone like that would get tempted. Doesn't make it right, but I get it.
Um, in terms of everything going on, how does something like this impact uh, you as someone who is, you know, making content about sports betting and, the odds of, XYZ? Does this change at all how you produce content, how you talk about the different games going on, how you kind of, I guess, advise in sort of ways, potential gamblers?
It's a great question. I don't think there is anything specifically that I can do on a daily basis because obviously I don't know where the fix exists if it does exist. So in that respect, content is more business as usual for me. I'm not going to try to get ahead of where I think a fix might be or something like that. I will say this though, and we just talked about that this morning. It doesn't mean though that I'm absolved of a greater responsibility. And many people who think that someone who's in the business of gambling content is just giving, is just, sort of virtue signaling with this, but I'm not. We talked about this how rampantly young kids are betting these days. If you know anyone in high school, or even in junior high school. If you know someone who's friends with people in junior high school or high school, you know how rampant sports betting has become now through legalization. And it's not just legalized sportsbook, right? It's sweepstakes models. It's the prize picks of the world. It's all these other things that these kids become really hooked on. And sometimes parents are abetting this by sort of rewarding their kids. Oh, you got good grades? Here's more money to gamble with. Ben Affleck just told a story last night. Was it last night or the night before on Jimmy Kimmel that he couldn't believe his son came to him and asked him for $100 to bet sports on. Now, Affleck has been walked out of the Hard Rock. Ben Affleck is no stranger to gambling, but even he, as a father, recognized that this is becoming an issue. So it's a long way of saying there are things that I feel that I can do responsibly and, you know, have part and parcel with what I do on a daily basis. But in terms of getting ahead of this particular problem where, oh, this player is going to be compromised, or do I think that that game was compromised? There isn't a whole lot that we can do in terms of anticipating it, identifying it, unless it's blatantly obvious. And in that case, my instinct is to say, oh, you guys are just imagining. But now I have to really, that's the biggest thing in all of this, long story short, is I have to acknowledge now that the rigged crowd, that the crowd that says that everything's rigged or everything fixed, sometimes they're right too.
And then also with it appears to be a norm now with all these big national stories that come out that there is a Las Vegas tie. It happens to be that Mr. Hennon, one of the defendants in the in the case, lives here in Vegas. What are your thoughts on that and just kind of how Las Vegas ends up being, just kind of a part of in some way, shape, or form of these stories?
Yeah, I mean, we had a Las Vegas resident on the show a few months ago, Matt Boyer. He's now doing time because he got involved in some stuff as well. So, yeah, look, I mean, when there is legalized sports betting, it's a thing. But I don't think it's anything specific to Nevada, to be honest with you. Like, I don't think there's a problem here in any way that's bigger than it is elsewhere or potentially elsewhere. I think the playing, I think back in the day, you could identify Nevada and specifically Las Vegas as maybe an epicenter of stuff like that. But I don't think we're particularly more rife with that to this day than we are elsewhere. I mean, most of this stuff is going to happen just in some college campus, small college campus where somebody in that neighborhood gets their hooks into somebody and these things will develop. So, I mean, I think the days, just like the days of gambling now are widespread throughout the country in 30 plus states, I think scandals will be in 30 plus states.